What's up, everybody? This is your boy Chainsaw. Boy, racism is unfortunately alive and well here in the Ozarks. I hate to say, but on the flip side, reality is certainly stranger than fiction. And we'll just jump right into that. Listen, I've been hanging on to this for a couple of weeks now, and I really wasn't even going to mention it in video or in the show. But boy, it's just been, beating at the back of my head, and I figure this is the perfect time to jump right in, right? So we'll get started with this. So the outlaw Josie Wales. The outlaw Josie Wales is apparently alive and Wales here in the Ozarks. So let's find out a little bit more about the personality, right? Yeah, I know this is Wikipedia. I don't cite their sources. Well, they do cite their sources, and you can go on to external links and check out the source material. If you don't trust Wikipedia, I get it. But I'm gonna leave that up for you. So Josie Wales is a fictional character created by author Forrest Carter for his 1973 novel, The Rebel Outlaw Josie Wales, republished in 1975 as Gone to Texas. So Texas is involved in this. So we've got to have some sort of a backstory, right? Wales is portrayed in the 76 Western film, The Outlaw Josie Wales, actor Clint Eastwood, portrayed by Michael Parks, turner Josie Wales. Background and character. Wales achieves notoriety after the American Civil War ends due to his refusal to surrender to the victorious Northern Army and his deadly reputation as a gunman. Okay, it says up here that his occupation is a gunfighter and an outlaw. Definitely American though, right? He carries 2 guns holstered in his belt, another tucked inside of his gun belt, one smaller inside of his coat. Bears a scar on his right cheek caused by a saber slash. Typically wears a gray cowboy slouch hat. So Scottish and Welsh origin. Wales is a farmer in the early days of the Civil War, living and working on his Missouri farm with his young son and wife, trying to stay out of the conflict. Ooh, trying to stay out of the conflict, but he's dragged in, right? Union guerrillas called Redlegs for their distinctive leggings and boots they wear, riding the pretense of being part of the Union Army, attack his farm, kill his family, burn his home, steal his livestock, and leave him for dead, right? So he goes on a vengeance rampage. Check out the movie. It's, it's got Clint Eastwood in it, right? So if you're not familiar. So Wales and Jamie, the only other survivor, find themselves fleeing from soldiers and bounty hunters and intent on capturing them. Jamie, having been wounded during the ambush, dies shortly thereafter. Josie embarks on a trek to Texas, one more time, Texas, meeting and becoming friends with several people on the way, including a woman named Laura Lee, who becomes his romantically, involved. Wales kills several of his pursuers in his trek, leading to an ultimate inevitable clash with a large militia group, saves the day, gets the girl, all that good stuff, right? So, what in the hell does this have to do with anything? Well, so, like I said, Josie Wales is apparently alive and Wales, and believe it or not, right here in the Ozarks, and strangely enough, posting in Facebook groups. So I'll let you be the judge on the character and the intentions and the motivations, right? So we'll just jump right into that. So I caught this a couple of weeks ago. Again, I wasn't going to. I was debating on whether or not to actually include this in the show, but finally I figured, what the hell, right? So apparently, the outlaw Josie Wales is actually posting in several online yard sales. Throughout southern Missouri. Saw one in Mountain Grove, Kabul. I think there was one in West Plains, a couple other online yard sales. So the outlaw Josie Wales, is this still available? But let's take a look and see what he's posting here. Let's see. Oh my goodness. My child is in the 3rd grade, the outlaw Josie Wales says, in Mountain Grove Elementary, and came home today with a grammar homework assignment that is an indoctrination into critical race theory using Juneteenth and slavery in a 9-year-old school assignment, ? Exclamation points forever. I never would have thought as a parent I would have to deal with this, especially here in Mountain Grove. Wow. One might ask, deal with what? But, one might further look into, okay, so they've got they're being indoctrinated into critical race theory using Juneteenth and slavery in a 9-year-old school assignment. Okay, so let's just pause for a second. Even if you're opposed to critical race theory, whatever you think that is being taught in school, if you consider that's indoctrination of some type, let's just play with that for a second. Okay, let's just play with that for a second. So yeah, obviously you're not going to be okay with this, right? This is going to definitely put the hairs on the back of your neck straight up, right? So let's take a look and see what it is here. They left an example of the homework assignment. Can we see that? Yep. All right. So vocabulary, strategy, context clues, right? Read this. This is the indoctrination. This is the critical race theory, CRT, wild liberal indoctrination. Read the sentences. And for those of you catching this in audio form, I'm going to actually read the homework to you. It's going to be great. Take notes, class. Read the sentences from quote-unquote Juneteenth. Underline the context clues that help you understand the meaning of each word in bold, and then write the word's meaning on the line. Hang on a second. So before we jump into that, some of you may be asking, strangely enough, Chainsaw, what's Juneteenth, bro? At which point, glad you did. Okay, so let's just jump right into that. What is Juneteenth? Now, let's again, we'll say what you will about Wikipedia. They cite their sources. You can look this stuff up on Wikipedia and take a look at the sources and see if you believe it or not. Okay, so let's jump into this. Juneteenth. Okay, according to Wikipedia, which is can be edited by anyone. Juneteenth, officially Juneteenth National Independence Day, and also known as Jubilee Day, Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, Black Independence Day, is a federal holiday in the United States commemorating the emancipation of African American slaves. It's often observed for celebrating African American culture. Yeah. Originating in Galveston, Texas. Now, for those of you who have actually been following and watching my YouTube channel, you know that earlier this year, right around Juneteenth, I actually spent it was about like 2.5 weeks in Galveston, Texas. It's a gorgeous, just wonderful place to be. It's humid as hell in the summer, but other than that, it's a gorgeous and wonderful place to be. The people there are incredibly friendly, but there is, unfortunately, a certain dynamic of very, very racist folk, and they only seem to come in a particular shade, and it's not African Americans, at least from my experience there. Just personal opinion, I definitely was in the downtown area, walked all up and down the seawall. Actually, some of the bling that I came back with is pull some of this up here. All this stuff you saw in a few videos back is all some of the wonderful trinkets I got from Murdoch's down there. Definitely an awesome place. Went to all the some of the great restaurants downtown. It's a fantastic spot to go with the family. But yeah, I definitely did come across a significantly larger portion of folks from the area and folks from the surrounding area, white folks, who were strikingly and painfully of a particular bias when it comes to racial matters. I could use stronger language, but we'll get into that. So originating in Galveston, Texas, it's been celebrated annually on June 19th in various parts of the U.S. since 1865. 1865? Well, we'll get into that in a second. The day was recognized as a federal holiday June 17th, 2021, and President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day into law. I'm sure a lot of you folks just love that. Juneteenth's commemoration, one of the anniversary dates, June 19th, 1865, announced General Order Number 3 by the Union Army General Gordon Granger. So keep that in mind. June 19th, 1865 is when General Order Number 3 was announced by the Union Army. Okay. So President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. This is for all you folks who didn't get the proper education in the first place. You might have kids in school. You might be concerned about what they're learning in CRT. This is for you, okay? President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1st, 1863. Now, why the hell is that important? Okay, well, 1863. The war ended April 9th, 1865. Wait a minute. Okay, so the war ended in April, at the beginning of April, in 1865. Juneteenth's commemoration is June 19th of the same year. So April, May, June, plus 10 days. Okay, so the war ends. The Confederacy lost. Just in case you weren't aware, the Confederacy lost. The war ended. 3 months and 10 days later, General Order Number 3 was announced by the Union Army. Okay. However, and this is the fun part. Now it says here, despite the surrender of Confederate General-in-Chief Robert E. Lee at Appomattox Courthouse, April 9th, 1865, ultimately ending the war, the Western Confederate Army of the Trans-Mississippi did not surrender until June 2nd, on the morning of June 19th, 1865. Okay, so that makes sense, right? Why it was 3 months and 10 days later. Okay, so that makes sense why it took a little bit longer for, that slavery to end, officially, for actual slaves to no longer be enslaved. However, we keep scrolling, and this is where it gets really disgusting. Although this event has come to be celebrated as the end of slavery, emancipation for the remaining enslaved in 2 Union border states, Delaware and Kentucky, would not come until several months later on December 18th, 1865. That's like 8 months and 9 days after the war ended. Okay? The war ended April 9th, 1865. In Delaware, Kentucky, slaves were still slaves in the United States until December. The war ends in April. There's still people held in bondage until mid-December. It's almost freaking Christmas. Okay? Maybe that's why it's important to some folks. But that's not even the worst part. So folks actually had the gall to take this all the way up to the Supreme Court, lasting up until 9 years after the Civil War ended. 9 years before the state of Texas recognized the 13th Amendment of the United States. That's why this is important to folks in the state of Texas, and specifically to folks in the city of Galveston. So, that's a little quick history on Juneteenth for you. Just in case you didn't know, now you know. And it's something you probably should have already known, but it's cool. It's cool. They didn't teach that in school, right? You see where I'm going with this? They didn't teach you that in school. That's why you didn't know something that's incredibly mind-blowing and important, right? Well, chainsaw slavery is over. It's been over for like over 100 years, and we'll get into that here in just a second. But let's go back to the outlaw Josie Wales and his fight for the southern cause here in the state of Missouri. So let's just jump right back into this real quick. So this is what Josie Wales considers CRT, critical race theory, being taught in Missouri's small town schools, right? Again, so we read the sentences from Juneteenth, which we just learned about what Juneteenth was, apparently. Underline the context clues that help you understand the meaning of each word in bold. Then write the word's meaning on the line. Communication was different back then. There were no telephones. There were no computers. Okay, so read the sentences from Juneteenth, underline the context clues that help you understand the meaning of each word in bold. The word in bold here is communication. So the words that would be helping you understand the context clues would be telephones and computers, because we use telephones and computers for communication. On June 19th, 1865, the last enslaved people in America learned they were free here in Texas, said Uncle Bernard. The bold word is enslaved. You might underline the word free. In Milwaukee, we have a parade. This is the bold word on June 19th. They shut down a few blocks. They shut down a street for a few blocks. We have music and games. It's like a block party for the whole city. The word in bold is parade. Parade. Back in 1872, some people here in Texas bought 10 acres. Acres is the bold word. The land became Emancipation Park. She pointed to portraits. Portraits is the word in bold, on a large quilt. The people wore clothes from long ago. Kayla recognized Douglas and Tubman from her, and the post cuts off there. So, critical race theory. Critical race theory. Critical race theory. I mean, yeah, the kids are learning something about Juneteenth, as was mentioned here. My child is in the 3rd grade in Mountain Grove Elementary. Came home today with a grammar homework assignment that's an indoctrination into critical race theory using Juneteenth and slavery in a 9-year-old school assignment. I'm pretty sure we learned about slavery when I was in school, probably about 3rd grade, to be honest. Definitely it was covered in 6th and 7th grade for sure. We had social studies classes when I was about 9 years old. That sounds about right. Indoctrination into critical race theory. I mean, what can you even say about this? I think my favorite part is I never would have thought that I, as a parent, would have to deal with this, especially here in Mountain Grove. You might take the time to deal with comprehension of the written word, firstly, but that's a thing. The guy's obviously off his rocker. I'm not going to go too deep into it. You can take a look, for yourself there. I'm not going to go into it. He's somehow connected with, a business that sells guns and has a bunch of Trump stuff. That might be completely unrelated. I have no idea. I'm not trying to make any assumptions or judgments here. I'm just letting you know. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but one has to kind of ask themselves, where does garbage like this come from? Where does this kind of just sheer stupidity come from? And well, one need not really look too far. Don't have to look too far at all. In fact, you can take a look at one of the articles that was released on October 4th in the Springfield News Leader. SPS asks for at least $170,000 to search for critical race theory records sought by Missouri lawmaker. What? $170,000 to search for critical race theory records? Well, we saw that one, and it's complete and utter BS. So, who's the lawmaker? Well, it's probably this guy, right? Greg Fischel, state rep, 136. Turning challenges into opportunities for Springfield. Maybe he should have looked up Juneteenth and kind of figured out what the history was there. I I don't know, but let's continue. So, a local lawmaker has made an official request for Springfield Public Schools to search 3 years worth of email and other documents for any reference to critical race theory and 21 other trigger words or phrases. State Rep. Craig Fischel filed the far-reaching Sunshine Law request in early September. District responded to provide the cost for searching, copying, and redacting an untold number of public records. The district requested a deposit of at least $170,000 to start searching different servers. Final cost, including any copying, redaction, were expected to be higher, although the exact amount was unknown. Fischel, a Republican from Springfield, alleged the districts used worst-case scenarios to inflate the cost of fulfilling the requests. Really? Bro, that's a worst-case scenario for even making the request. Are you out of your mind? But again, I digress. Factoring in, as according to a press release sent September 28th by the Missouri House. Great. So the whole place is into it. Factoring in estimates for copying and redacting, he projected an initial $194,324 price tag. Parents in my district and across the state have a right to know what's being taught to their children in our public schools, and our school officials have an obligation to be transparent and forthcoming with this information, Fischel said in the release. Now keep in mind, this is the same place where they had the big meeting about critical race theory, its benefits, its follies, and the whole meeting was held by white folks. So that's a thing. That's a thing. My request is a simple one, and is designed to ensure that controversial topics aren't being taught in our schools without parents being unaware, or without parents being aware. Controversial topics? You mean history, bro. You mean history. What is controversial about history? Okay. So let me just give you one man's opinion, one Asian man's opinion who went to school in southern Missouri. Okay? Who was born and raised in the Ozarks and had an education here in the sticks of southern Missouri. Okay? The only reason, and again, we learned social studies from an early age. I mean, this was American history was like a fan favorite of most, at least from my experience, of most of my social studies teachers. We had a few that talked about world history, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, all that. But for the most part, it was all American Civil War. That was like the focus, right? Every one of these schools that, at least back in those days, every one of these schools, their history teacher was also, history social studies teacher was also a football coach. And a lot of them were very much interested in going over the Civil War and American history specifically. So, that was something that was taught. But, let me be the first one, just in case you never heard this before, let me be the first one to tell you the only reason that we learn about Lebensraum when it comes to World War II, and that the story of Manifest Destiny are taught that they're different, is because over here, it actually worked. I mean, by worked, I mean there was an actual genocide of millions of people, and they were displaced from their land and moved, and then the Nationals moved in, and that's where we're at today. Okay, so I mean that should not be controversial. That Manifest Destiny and Lebensraum are the exact same thing. It's history. It is what it is. Facts are facts. You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Manifest Destiny was actually one of the leading proponents as to why, the NSDAP thought that Lebensraum would be, an acceptable policy. Now look it up. Don't believe me. I'm just some guy in a hoodie. But I digress. So let's jump back here. This summer, the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education sent a survey asking each district to report if it used critical race theory or the 1619 project in its classroom. Springfield and the vast majority of districts reported neither was being taught in class. The only exceptions were in Kansas City, Hazelwood, and University City. News Leader obtained the Sunshine Law request official filed on official letterhead, the Superintendent Granita Latham, as well as the district's initial response September 13th and a lengthy itemized response September 20th. That response, which we are providing in its entirety, makes it clear that we are willing to work with representative official to understand and fulfill his request, said Stephen Hall, as Chief Communications Officer for the district. As currently drafted, the request is extraordinarily broad in scope. It has the potential to divert hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of district staff time to search and review thousands of pages of documents. Right, because it's incredibly idiotic. It's incredibly broad because it's based on nothing. I mean, this is very much like, this is about as goofy as the Arizona, voter fraud investigation where they were looking for bamboo, and it turns out, well, you know what the results were, right? But that's not good enough for some folks either, I guess. During the past school year, allegations surfaced that the districts embedded critical race theory, which examines systemic racism in U.S. institutions, and its mandatory equity, diversity training for staffs and teachers. The allegation prompted dozens to address the school board, as well as 2 protests and a lawsuit filed by 2 employees. Lathan, who joined the district on July 1st, said in August that critical race theory is not being taught in our classrooms. Official, who is married to a retired Springfield teacher and has grandchildren enrolled in the district, requested school officials search all documents related to its teachers and staff, plus training and curriculum. And they got a fun list here of some of the terms that they want these folks to dig through all these, bajillion documents for. So let's go over some of this. So critical race theory, or critical theory, right? 1619 project, long-form journalism project to examine the impact of slavery and contributions of African Americans. Black Lives Matter. Okay. What? All right. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're not supposed to teach that in school? I mean, what the hell is that? Culturally responsive education. Implicit bias. Intersectionality. Systemic racism. Restorative justice. Whiteness, white privilege, and white fragility. It's white fragility that makes this a thing in the first place. Oppression, matrix, oppressor, oppressed, spirit murder, anti-racism or racism, collective guilt, affinity spaces, disparate impact theory, colorism, microaggression, social justice, culturally responsive curriculum scorecard, teaching tolerance. Bruh. If school's not teaching tolerance, let me tell you, I went to school here in Missouri, in southern Missouri in the 1990s, and tolerance was definitely something that was not taught. Okay, I personally saw on several occasions some of these little, well, lack of a better way to say it, some of the folks who are now police officers and, lawyers or whatever, honestly, some of them who are high school coaches in communities around the area also, very much who should have been taught tolerance, firstly at home, and secondly at school, because these little racist jagoffs were definitely involved in things that the school should not have put up with regarding bullying, and regarding bullying based solely upon race. So if you think that's a bad thing to be taught in school, tolerance, forget all the rest of this stuff. Forget all the rest of this political stuff and whatever, the left, the right, If you think that not teaching children tolerance is a bad thing, I mean, I have lived through the intolerance in the school systems here in Missouri personally, and I can tell you, it's definitely something that they need to be putting a little more focus on for the sake of people of color. Learning for justice. Okay, he also asked for all documents and materials from or related to the Pulitzer Center, the Zion Education Center, Southern Poverty Law Center. Official asked that the copies be sent to his office in Jefferson City. He asked the district to waive any fees for locating and copying the materials. I respectfully request expedited processing of this request. Yeah, sure. That's why you made such a broad request there, guy. The district noted in a response dated September 13th that it did not receive officials' request until September 8th. Board Secretary Tammy Harrington, the custodian of records, responded that the request will require the district to search all of its servers for any reference to many trigger words or phrases. She noted the following will need to be searched: staff Google Drive, Canvas learning management system, district file shares, district email servers, and local computer files. The Sunshine Law requires a government entity, when possible, to use the employee making the lowest hourly wage to search and copy public records. The Missouri Supreme Court also recently ruled that public bodies cannot charge for time attorneys spend redacting documents requested under the Sunshine Law. So, it just continues from there. Absolutely ridiculous request from Representative Craig Fischel from District 136. I have no words. Because, again, this is something I know a lot about from personal experience, and it's disgusting. It's absolutely just horrifying that someone would be so callous and so incredibly stupid. But if you're wondering where, somebody like the outlaw Josie Wales gets their mindless garbage to post something like this, in the Facebook marketplace in the first place, and on some of the old local yard sale pages, actually spam this out, I will say this: thank goodness to the good folks who actually do live down here. And this is, again, coming from a person of color who was born and raised in this area. Especially thanks to white folks who stood up against this clown, and basically called him out on his incredible stupidity. Not only for posting something, egregiously misleading, but also, just for coming out and making the reference. Now, there were a ton of comments on some of these posts, and some of them were shameful and stupid. Others were, again, that's the kind of thing that makes me proud to be from here, because despite all the garbage that's going on out there, and despite all the incredibly just ignorant, racist, that we have to consider our neighbors, there are a lot of really good and intelligent and got with it folks who live down here in the Ozarks, and they're the only reason that I am even still here, keeping it real. So if you personally were standing up for injustice, and standing up against just sheer stupidity, I commend you. You're awesome. But I'll leave you with this. This is part of LBJ's speech when presenting the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He said, it's not just Negroes, I love the vernacular of the time, but really it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice, and we shall overcome. As a man whose roots go deeply into Southern soil, I know how agonizing racial feelings are. I know how difficult it is to reshape the attitudes and the structure of our society, but a century has passed, more than 100 years since the Negro was freed, and he is not fully free tonight. It was more than 100 years ago that Abraham Lincoln, great president of another party, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But emancipation is a proclamation and not a fact. A century has passed, more than 100 years since equality was promised, and yet the Negro is not equal. A century has passed since the day of promise, and the promise is unkept. The time of justice has now come, and I tell you that I believe sincerely that no force can hold it back. It is right in the eyes of man and God that it should come, and when it does, I think that day, right in the lives of every American. Again, not my favorite Democrat president, but good words, man. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we'll have more after this. Webull is the stock app and trading platform that everybody's using, and I mean everybody's using. You've seen it all over YouTube. I use it on my own channel to show what's happening in the market. You pay 0 commission fees. You can own fractional shares. You can even trade in cryptocurrencies and access real-time market data. Use my referral link, chainsawccc.com/Weeble. That's chainsawccc.com/Weeble, Webull, and get you 2 free stocks. Simply by opening an account and depositing any amount, get you 2 free stocks from Weeble. Believe me, you're going to want this one. So for some somber news here in pro-life Missouri, this coming from Jefferson City AP, on October 1st, ex-governor calls for clemency for Missouri death row inmate. Ex-governor. Former Missouri governor is urging the current occupant of the office to grant clemency to a convicted killer who is days away from facing execution. Democrat Bob Holden was elected in 2000, served 1 term, in a commentary for the Missouri Independent. Holden notes that he supports capital punishment in principle, evidenced by the 20 executions that occurred during his time in office. But Holden writes that Republican Governor Mike Parson should halt the execution of Ernest Johnson, scheduled for 6 p.m. on Tuesday at the state prison in Bonne Terre. Holden writes that he concurs with advocates who say Johnson is intellectually and developmentally disabled. The U.S. Constitution prohibits the execution of the mentally disabled. And as of this article, Governor Parson was still mulling it over, right? So then on October 4th, Missouri governor denies clemency to death row inmates. And this is also going to be covered in this article. Some words from Pope Francis, but let's just jump right into it. So Missouri Governor Mike Parson on Monday declined to grant clemency to death row inmate Ernest Johnson, despite requests for a mercy from the Pope, 2 federal lawmakers, and thousands of petition signers. Johnson, 61, is convicted of killing 3 convenience store workers during a closing time robbery in 1994. He's scheduled to die by injection 6 p.m. Tuesday at the state prison in Bonne Terre, 50 miles south of St. Louis. The state is prepared to deliver justice and carry out the lawful sentence Mr. Johnson received in accordance with the Missouri Supreme Court's order, Mike Parson said in a statement about the decision not to reduce the sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The lawful sentence. We'll get into that. Jeremy Weiss, Johnson's lawyer, said he was very disappointed by the decision. We believe we made a compelling case to him that it was the right moral decision. I guess he disagreed. In a letter last week to Parson, a representative for Pope Francis wrote that the Pope wishes to place before you the simple fact of Mr. Johnson's humanity and sacredness of all human life. It wasn't the first time Pope has sought to intervene in a Missouri execution. In 1999, during his visit to St. Louis, Pope John Paul II persuaded Democratic Governor Mel Carnahan to grant clemency to Darrell Meese just weeks before Meese was scheduled to be put to death for a triple killing. In 2018, Pope Francis changed church teachings to say that capital punishment can never be sanctioned because it constitutes an attack on human dignity. Catholic leaders have been outspoken opponents of the death penalty in many states. Weiss said executing Johnson would violate the 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits executing intellectually disabled people. He said multiple IQ tests and other exams have shown that Johnson has the intellectual capacity of a child. He also was born with a fetal alcohol syndrome, and in 2008, he lost about 20% of his brain tissue due to the removal of a benign tumor. More on that. So hopefully they give him. Obviously, it didn't go so well for Ernest Johnson. We'll get into that. A Missouri man was put to death Tuesday for killing 3 workers while robbing a convenience store nearly 3 decades ago. An execution performed over injections from racial justice activists, lawmakers, and even the Pope. Ernest Johnson died from an injection of pentobarbital at the state prison in Bonne Terre. He silently mouthed words to relatives as the process began. His breathing became labored. He puffed out his cheeks, then swallowed hard. Within seconds, all movement stopped. In his written last statement, Johnson said he was sorry and have remorse for what I do. actually wrote a letter. He said he loved his family and friends and thanked those who prayed for him. Johnson was pronounced dead at 6:11 p.m., 9 minutes after the dose was administered. Corrections Department spokeswoman said four relatives representing all three victims were present. Johnson's witnesses included relatives and his lawyer. No relatives spoke after the execution. Well, there were 59 demonstrators gathered on the edge of the prison grounds. It was the first execution in Missouri since May 2020, and just the seventh in the U.S. this year. The state moved ahead with executing Johnson despite claims by his attorney that doing so would violate the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits executing intellectually disabled people. Johnson had a history of scoring extremely low IQ tests dating back to his childhood. His attorney also mentioned he was born with a fetal alcohol syndrome, lost about a fifth of his brain tissue when a benign tumor was removed in 2008. The Pope made his request. So yeah, it's crazy. I think this article also makes reference to the pentobarbital. Police officers searching nearly found. What's about the crime? Nope, that's about it. Yeah, one of these articles that I'd pulled up here actually makes reference to the pentobarbital. I guess they were concerned that it would have a reaction with his missing brain tissue, which would actually cause seizures. The reason that when we do state-sanctioned executions and they use the methods that they do is to execute, convicts, convicted of these type of crimes, or crimes that would lead to the death penalty, in the most humane way possible, right? It's state-sanctioned executions are not there to be torture. They're there to be quick, efficient, and to deliver justice, as it were, right? So the governor made reference to this being legal. Well, we already know that Governor Mike Parson is not necessarily the best friend of the law, despite years of being a law enforcement officer himself. Again, I've actually covered on this show, or rather my YouTube channel, about how the unemployment benefits that were slashed, the very act of that, using an executive order by the governor to slash unemployment benefits for folks across the state of Missouri, that goes against the Missouri Constitution or revised statutes, and the creation of a, not only unemployment benefits here in the state of Missouri, but also goes against U.S. federal code regarding unemployment. Remember, cronyism is the word of the day? Well, so I guess that's just one more notch in the belt of Governor Mike Parson having no regard for, Missouri state law, federal law, certainly not any regard for the U.S. Constitution or, the sanctity of life, right? The party of law and order, pro-life. Look, you be the judge. Don't take my word for it. But let's take a look here. This is actually from Catherine from Merck TV, posted Ernest Johnson's last statement before his execution on Tuesday. And for those who are only catching the audio, I'll read it to you. I'll read it to you as it's written, or the best I can. It says in pretty decent handwriting here, I am sorry, and that's sorry with two O's, SOORY. I'm sorry and have remorse for what I do. I want to say that I love my family and friends. I am thankful of all that my lawyer, and that's lawyer spelled capital LAWER, has done for me. They made me feel love as if I was family to them. I love them all. Lowercase f in for all the people, so that was after a period, lowercase f, for all the people that has prayed, and that's prayed for me. I thank them from the bottom of my period. Assuming meant bottom of my heart. I love the Lord with all my heart and soul. If I am executed, boy, he got that word right though. Boy, he knows how to write the word executed though. Jesus Christ. If I am executed, I know where, and that's WERE, I am going to heaven. If I am executed, I know where I am going to heaven. One sentence. Because, missing the E at the end, I ask him to forgive me. That's forgive, 2 words. I ask him to forgive me. God, assuming that's everyone, but it's missing the Y. Wit, WHIT, respect, Ernest L. Johnson. But of course, he was in his right state of mind and was perfectly, humane for Governor Mike Parson to refuse clemency. Did the governor break the law? I don't know. Does he kind of have a history of this? You be the judge, right? Boy, this guy just is unstoppable. Absolutely an unstoppable menace to humanity. Wow. I thought it was just a nightmare and a debacle to have him be the governor of the state of Missouri, but yeah, when you're pissing the Pope off like that, I mean, this is the kind of cruelty that would make Martin Luther, turn over in his grave. I'm just saying. So let's just jump into some real quick comments from Governor Mike Parson, because Mike Parson loves his Twitter. It's like his best friend, right? This is from Governor Mike Parson. Well, it says 8 hours ago, but this was posted back May of 2019, May 15, 2019. But from Governor Mike Parson's own Twitter, it's time to make Missouri the most pro-life state in the country. Are you freaking kidding me, guy? Thanks to the leaders in the House and the Senate, we are one vote away from passing one of the strongest pro-life bills in the country, standing for life, protecting women's health, and advocating for the unborn. Ah, man, come on. Thanks to decades of conservative pro-life leadership, Missouri recently hit an all-time low for the number of abortions. We've gone from a high of more than 20,000 in the state, blah, blah. I can't even with this guy. Look, it was weird before to see the sheer lack of humanity coming out of this guy's mouth last year. When he was saying things like, "Oh, well, if you're afraid to get out and vote, you should probably just stay home right before an election," right? Stupidity. But now again, he's allowing for his lapdog, Eric Schmidt, to sue schools because they want to put mask mandates to keep kids from dying, which I don't know if anybody heard, but they just had a kid who died back in August that just got published. I think it was either KY3 or the News Leader had just published about a child who had died from COVID back in August that just got published like today. Or on August 6th, right? Or October 6th, whatever month it is. They say if you know what day it is, you're not busy enough. On October 6th, I got published that there was the first child who died of COVID in Greene County, right? So, if they were over 6 and under 18, they were in involved in the school system there. But this guy's just letting his lapdog go around and file suits against schools because they can't handle their business, and then talking about the party of pro-life, the party of law and order, and meanwhile trying to put together legislation to prevent the federal government from controlling what he and they operate. I can't even with this guy. That's one thing. This is a whole new level of stupidity and cruelty. But hey, if you voted for him, that blood's on your hands too. But we're gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna get some coffee in me, and we'll see you then. If day trading is too stressful or you just don't want to deal with the volatility of the market, M1 Finance has got you covered. This easy-to-use trading platform basically lets you build your own index fund out of companies that you believe in. And if you use my link at chainsawccc.com/M1, M1 Finance will give you a free $30 just for signing up and funding your M1 account. Get started today. chainsawccc.com/M1. $30 is waiting for you, bro. Ugh, seriously cannot do any more news. We got a few more minutes. Talk amongst yourselves or something.
When I was a young boy, the KKK announced a night rally in my home county.
What is this, a political ad? Come on, I can't escape this stuff.
A cross burning with hundreds of Klansmen to terrorize the blacks and Lumbee. We were a poor farming community, black, white, and Indian. My parents and grandparents were sharecroppers like many. The police chief warned the Grand Dragon, "These people don't want your trouble." The Klansmen called us mongrels, half-breeds, and told him the Klan would show him how to handle people like us. That night they rolled in with their cars, their crosses, and a single light bulb hooked to a car battery. 50 Klansmen. Not a bad turnout on a cold night.
What?
Problem is, they were surrounded by 400 Lumbees.
Okay.
Simeon Oxendine had been a tail gunner in a B-29 during the war. Verdia Locklear was 4 months pregnant. Neil Lowry was the local barber. Hundreds of normal folks deciding to stand together against ignorance and hate.
Well, that's real.
Lowry shot out the light. The Klansmen scattered. By the time the sheriff arrived to fish them out of the swamp, the press was running with the story. The Battle of Hayes Pond, where one town beat the Klan. A piece of forgotten history, worth remembering, especially today. In Washington, lies turn to violence. And the biggest lie is that America is at war with itself. That you can't trust your neighbor, that they want something.
More Missourians making the news. Speaking of which, there were just 2 gals who were caught, I believe it was in Springfield, that were out there that are now being charged because, you know, they just can't stop with this stupidness.
That's yours. That you must live in fear of them.
And yeah, I know this has been mentioned on social media, but the old Charlottesville rally, that piece of trash, Ted Von Newcomb, funny story, I actually trained that guy. My first ever communications job, first ever sales job, phone sales job. Actually trained that guy. Actually used to play chess with that guy back in the day. That was before he made national news for also being racist trash. But yeah, one of them fellers right there yonder.
But the people who stood up at Hayes Pond refused to be afraid. I grew up with their story, and the lesson is human dignity is a human right. When I started teaching special needs children in the 80s, they had almost no rights in our schools. So I spent 30 years fighting the system to recognize their humanity. And as a legislator, I don't play politics. I study, I listen, and I vote my conscience. I'm Charles Graham, and I'm running for Congress because sometimes we're called upon to put things right, like Hayes Pond in 1958 and America today, where access to affordable health care is still out of reach to many families, where the sand...
Another thing we just got here in the state of Missouri, no thanks to Governor Mike Parson.
Hills face the highest unemployment rates in the country, and our veterans return from war, seeking opportunities and finding none. These folks didn't set out to make history, they just answered a neighbor's call. It happened here before, and now it's our turn.
Nice. Well, I feel sorry for the person who's running against this guy. It's funny though. Whoever it was, the 3 videos that this guy used in his political ad, either actually or somewhere within the event, feature just the most inglorious geniuses that the state of Missouri specifically has been able to pump out over the last couple of years. But yeah, so that's cool. All right, well let's see what else is on here. Oh, here we go. Another white guy with a beard. Let's see what he has to say. I bet he's going to talk with some kind of country bumpkin accent too.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again.
Oh, really? What is this?
So today, we're going to talk about Hayes Pond. If you are unaware, if you've missed it, a candidate in North Carolina by the name of Charles Graham, he put out an ad referencing an event that occurred in the 1950s.
Just saw it.
And it's gone pretty viral. Have a whole bunch of questions that came in. Basically, is it true? Fact check it, that kind of thing.
Okay.
If that's all you want to know, that's accurate. The only thing that is disputed in that I'm aware of is whether or not one of the acts was intentional or it happened by accident. But as far as it being factually accurate, everything in that is historical record. If anything, that ad plays down how cool that event really was.
What? Okay, I gotta know more.
So today we're going to do a little Paul Harvey thing, and you're going to get the rest of the story when it comes to the Battle of Hayes Pond.
Neat.
Okay, so it starts with a guy named James Catfish Cole. Catfish being the nickname. Well, he served during World War II, and he was a minister and a taxi driver.
Oh.
He was also the Grand Dragon over the Klan in North and South Carolina.
Oh, imagine that.
He had motorcades, so what they called them, where they would drive through neighborhoods, scare people, yell at them, fire out the windows, stuff like that.
Ironic. We know all about that here in Missouri, specifically the Ozarks of northern Arkansas and southern Missouri. What was it? The Sunshine Laws that were in place there for a while. That actually started in Rogers, Arkansas, and made its way all the way up here to the southern parts of Missouri, where literally terrorism was the was the law of the land. If you don't know what sunshine laws are, kids, you might want to Google that and not ask your parents. Just based on what I'm seeing on Facebook, look it up yourself. I promise you'll be surprised if you don't know.
They did this accompanied by the cops. Cops said it was, to maintain order.
What'd I just say?
Cole was pretty popular. His rallies drew thousands.
I'll bet.
Now, on the other side, you have Robert Williams with the NAACP. He was funded by a doctor, Dr. Perry. Now, Williams, he's like, we got some World War II vets of our own, And he reached out to the NRA, National Rifle Association, and he got a charter for a group. There's some discussion over whether or not the NRA knew exactly what they were chartering when they did it, but either way, that occurred. And he called it the Black Armed Guard. And these are World War II vets mostly, and they trained for community defense, and they protected important leaders in North Carolina.
Huh. So support the troops, huh? Hey, it don't go both ways. Clearly, some of them were Klan members. Some of them were, being terrorized by the Klan. So, pick a side, folks. I don't know.
Now, in October of 1957, Cole held a rally in Monroe. And then one of those motorcades took off going to Perry's house. Same thing, yelling out the windows, firing wildly, stuff like that, scaring people. Campaign of terror. Then they got to Perry's house, and they found out it's not so fun when the rabbits got the gun and prepared fighting positions. They took off. There was an exchange of gunfire, and Catfish's crew, well, they left.
Sound like they want to do.
And then this weird thing happened. It seemed like Catfish just wasn't quite as interested in messing with the black community anymore. So he turned his attention to the natives.
Hey, remember that thing we were saying earlier about Lebensraum and Manifest Destiny? I think we discussed that earlier, just today.
And he targeted the Lumbees. Now, the local cops at the time were kind of like, you may not want to do this. To put it in modern terminology, the local cops were worried he was about to find out. And that's exactly what happened. He was doing his rallies, and they were going to do one at this field that they rented near Hayes Pond, near a little town called Maxton. And they announced it way in advance. And the natives were kind of like, y'all all going to be in one place in the middle of the night, surrounded by dense forest, away from any kind of reinforcement. That's a great idea. Y'all should do that.
You guys are the most smartest.
You know. Now, some of the members of Catfish's group, well, they were a little bit smarter, and they realized that this may not be a great idea. So Catfish was expecting 5,000 people to show up. 50 did. And then out of the woods come a bunch of natives. And they were armed with everything from traditional native implements to like M1s. And Catfish's crew goes on the run again. They get defeated again. There is some dispute. It seems as though both the black community and white progressives in the area offered to help. And it's hard to figure out. It seems like at some points they were turned away because the Lumbee had the plan and they didn't want to disrupt the plan. And in other cases, some of them joined in. The effects from this, it drew a lot of attention. Now, going after Perry and getting defeated there, that was kind of got ignored. But the defeat at Hayes Pond, well, that got a lot of attention. It led to the governor denouncing the Klan. It led to Catfish getting arrested. It turned into a big deal. And after that, I guess Catfish left the state for a while. After he did some time, he came back, tried to reassert his position.
Oh, of course.
Within the group.
Didn't work so
got
good,
ousted.
probably. Right.
These two events, this chain of events right here, really shut down widespread operations from the Klan. It led to a lot. Now, as far as a fact check of what's said in that ad, there's nothing that's wrong with it. The light that gets shot out, I've read some things that said that was an accident, that it wasn't that he intentionally shot out the light when it started. It just
the guy missed,
occurred.
maybe.
That's the only thing that's in dispute, and I don't see that as being very material to anything. So, at the end of the day, I think that while the story is definitely cool, I would question why a description of a historical event from the 1950s is still relevant when it comes to American politics. And what does that say? That an account of the Klan being defeated is still a good political ad today. I don't know what it says, but I'm pretty sure it's not good. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
I don't know. I guess we could probably ask, the outlaw Josie Wales why it's still relevant and still a great subject matter for a political ad today. I bet he could probably answer that for us right quick. It's fantastic. Oh, man. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I am definitely going to be liking and subscribing to this guy's YouTube channel. And speaking of which, if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to my channel just as well. And yeah, bro, we'll see you in the next one.